The knock came at 2:30 a.m. 3 desperate pounds that cut through the silence of my tiny apartment. I opened the door expecting my neighbor with some emergency. Instead, I found my boss standing there, soaked from the rain, mascara streaked down her face, holding her sleeping 5-year-old daughter. Sarah Mitchell, the woman who signed my paychecks at the marketing firm where I worked, was trembling on my doorstep at 2:30 in the morning. The woman who barely acknowledged my existence during business hours was now looking at me like I was her last hope. What happened next shattered every assumption I had about success, motherhood, and the secret struggles of the people we think have it all figured out. My name is Jake Morrison, and I'm a 31-year-old single dad raising my 8-year-old son Tommy on a graphic designer's salary. Not exactly living the American dream, but we make it work. My apartment is small, my car is 15 years old, and my idea of a fancy dinner is ordering pizza with 2 toppings instead of 1. But Tommy and we've built a good life together after his mom left us 3 years ago for her personal trainer. That Monday night, I just finished helping Tommy with his math homework and was settling in for a few hours of freelance work to pay for his upcoming school field trip. The rain was coming down hard outside our second-floor apartment, and I could hear the storm getting worse. That's when the knocking started. I looked through the peephole and couldn't believe what I was seeing. Sarah Mitchell, the creative director at Morrison & Associates, the woman who commanded meeting rooms full of clients and never seemed to have a hair out of place, was standing in my hallway looking absolutely destroyed. Sarah was successful, confident, always perfectly put together. She drove a BMW, lived in the expensive part of town, and commanded respect from everyone in the office. To me, she was untouchable, existing in a completely different world from mine. We'd worked at the same company for 2 years, but our interactions were strictly professional. She'd give me project briefs, I'd deliver designs, she'd approve or request changes. That was it. But the woman standing in my hallway wasn't a polished executive I knew from work. Her designer coat was soaked through, her usually perfect blonde hair was plastered to her head, and she was clutching a little girl who was wrapped in a soggy blanket. "Jake," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm so sorry to bother you. I didn't know where else to go." I stepped aside immediately. Come in, come in. What's wrong?" As they entered my modest living room, I could see the little girl more clearly. She was maybe 5 years old, with Sarah's blonde hair and big blue eyes that were red from crying. She clung to her mother like her life depended on it. "This is Emma," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My daughter." I was stunned. In 2 years of working together, Sarah had never mentioned having a child. At office parties, she talked about her weekend trips to wine country, her yoga classes, her latest renovation project on her house. Never once had she mentioned being a mother. "I need to sit down," Sarah said, and I guided her to my couch, the same second-hand couch where Tommy and I had movie nights every Friday. "Can I get you something? Coffee? Water?" I asked, suddenly aware of how different my apartment must look to someone who lived in Sarah's world. My furniture was mismatched, my walls were covered with Tommy's artwork instead of expensive paintings, and my kitchen was visible from the living room because the whole place was only 900 square feet. "Water would be good," she said, settling Emma beside her on the couch. As I filled 2 glasses in the kitchen, I could hear Sarah talking quietly to Emma, reassuring her that they were safe now. When I returned, Emma had fallen asleep against her mother's shoulder. "Jake, I need to tell you something," Sarah began, and her voice carried a weight I'd never heard before. Everything you think you know about my life is a lie. Over the next hour, Sarah told me a story that completely shattered my perception of success and the price some people pay for it. Sarah wasn't the carefree, successful single woman I'd imagined. She was a single mother who had been hiding her daughter's existence from our workplace for over 2 years. Emma lived with Sarah's mother during the week while Sarah worked her demanding job, and Sarah only got to see her daughter on weekends. The company has this culture, Sarah explained, bouncing Emma gently as she slept. They say they're family-friendly, but every mother who's had a child there has been quietly pushed out within a year. Suddenly their projects get reassigned, they get passed over for promotions, they're excluded from important meetings. The message is clear: motherhood and career success don't mix. So Sarah had made an impossible choice. She hid her pregnancy, took only 2 weeks off when Emma was born by claiming it was a medical procedure, and then created an elaborate fiction about her life to protect both her career and her ability to provide for her daughter. My mother watches Emma Monday through Friday, Sarah continued. I pick her up Friday evening and drop her off Monday morning. The weekends are ours, but during the week, I pretend to be someone I'm not. The strain of living this double life was destroying Sarah. She was working 60-hour weeks to prove her dedication, missing most of Emma's childhood milestones, and living in constant fear that someone would discover her secret. Tonight was Emma's preschool graduation, Sarah said, tears starting to flow again. My mother was supposed to take her, but she fell and broke her hip yesterday. She's in the hospital. I couldn't let Emma miss her graduation, so I left work early, told everyone I had a client dinner, and went to the school. But Sarah's carefully constructed world had started crumbling when she ran into Brad Stevens from our office at the preschool. Brad was there with his wife picking up their son, and he saw Sarah with Emma. He put it together immediately, Sarah said. I could see it in his eyes. He knows I have a daughter, and tomorrow he's going to tell everyone at work. Brad Stevens was ambitious, competitive, and known for using office gossip to advance his own career. If he exposed Sarah's secret, it wouldn't just cost her job. It would destroy the professional reputation she'd spent years building. That's why I came here, Sarah said, looking around my humble apartment. You're the only person at work who's ever talked about your son openly. You're the only one who might understand what it's like to put your child first. She was right. I did talk about Tommy at work. I left early for his soccer games, took days off when he was sick, brought him to the office Christmas party. I'd never hidden the fact that I was a father, but I'd also never thought about how different that experience might be for a woman in our male-dominated industry. What are you going to do? I asked. Sarah looked down at Emma, sleeping peacefully for the first time all evening. I don't know. I can't keep lying, but I can't lose my job either. Emma depends on me. My mother's medical bills are mounting up. I need that income. That's when Tommy appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes and wearing his dinosaur pajamas. The sound of our conversation had woken him up. Dad? What's going on? I introduced Tommy to Sarah and Emma, watching as my son's natural curiosity took over. Within minutes, he was quietly showing Emma his collection of toy cars, speaking in whispers so he wouldn't scare her. Watching our children interact, something clicked for me. Sarah wasn't just my boss anymore. She was a parent, just like me, trying to navigate an impossible situation while protecting her child. You can stay here tonight, I said suddenly. Both of you. Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do about work. Sarah looked at me with surprise. Jake, I can't ask you to get involved in this. If Brad tells everyone about Emma, and they find out you helped me hide it, it could hurt your job too. Maybe, I said. But right now, you and Emma need a safe place to sleep. Everything else we can deal with tomorrow. That night, I gave Sarah and Emma my bedroom while Tommy and I camped out in the living room. As I lay on the couch listening to the rain against the windows, I thought about the courage it must have taken for Sarah to live this double life for 2 years. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of pancakes and the sound of children laughing. Sarah was in my kitchen making breakfast while Tommy and Emma played with building blocks on the floor. You didn't have to cook, I said, accepting a cup of coffee that was infinitely better than anything I usually made. It's the least I could do, Sarah replied. Jake, I've been thinking about what you said last night. About figuring this out together. Over breakfast, we developed a plan. Instead of waiting for Brad to expose Sarah's secret, we decided she should control the narrative. Sarah would request a meeting with HR and our department head to discuss her situation as a working mother and propose solutions that would benefit both her and the company. What if they fire me? Sarah asked. Then we'll document everything and you'll have grounds for a discrimination lawsuit, I replied. But I think there's a chance they might surprise you. The company has been struggling to retain talented women. Maybe they'll see this as an opportunity to actually become the family-friendly workplace they claim to be. The conversation with HR didn't go exactly as we'd planned, but it went better than Sarah had feared. Instead of firing her, they offered her a flexible arrangement. She could work from home 3 days a week and bring Emma to the office's daycare facility on the days she needed to be there in person. It's not perfect, Sarah told me that evening. The daycare is expensive, and I'll probably have to take a small pay cut for the flexible schedule. But Emma and I can finally stop hiding. The change in Sarah over the following weeks was remarkable. She seemed lighter, more relaxed, more genuine. She started eating lunch in the break room instead of at her desk, joined conversations about weekend plans, and even brought Emma to the office Halloween party. But the biggest change was in our relationship. Working together took on a new dimension when we both understood the challenges of single parenthood. Sarah would cover for me when Tommy had a doctor's appointment, and I'd help her with late projects when Emma had a school event. You know what's funny? Sarah said one Friday evening as we were both leaving the office early for our kids' soccer games. I spent so much energy hiding Emma that I forgot how much easier life becomes when you let people help you. 3 months after that rainy night when Sarah knocked on my door, she invited Tommy and me over for dinner at her house. Walking into her beautiful home, I expected to see the perfect showplace I'd imagined. Instead, I found a lived-in family home with Emma's artwork on the refrigerator, toys scattered in the living room, and photos of mother and daughter covering every surface. This is what my house really looks like when I'm not pretending to be someone else, Sarah laughed, stepping over a pile of coloring books to reach the kitchen. Dinner was chaotic and wonderful. Emma and Tommy bickered over who got the last dinner roll. Sarah burned the garlic bread while trying to help Tommy with a homework problem, and I found myself doing dishes in a kitchen that cost more than my car while Sarah gave Emma a bath upstairs. Jake, Sarah said later, after both kids had fallen asleep watching a movie on her couch. I need to tell you something. We were sitting on her back patio, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the sunset over her perfectly manicured backyard. That night when I showed up at your apartment, I wasn't just running from Brad finding out about Emma, she said. I was running from myself. From the person I'd become by hiding such a huge part of my life. She paused, looking out at the yard where a swing set stood that she'd probably installed in secret, only bringing Emma home on weekends. I'd convinced myself that being a good mother meant providing financial security above everything else. I thought success meant keeping all the different parts of my life in separate boxes. But watching you with Tommy, seeing how open you are about being a father, it made me realize that maybe the best thing I could give Emma wasn't a perfect career or a perfect house. What was it then? I asked. A mother who wasn't ashamed of being her mother, Sarah said simply. 6 months later, Sarah got promoted to senior creative director. Not despite being a working mother, but partly because of it. Her experience balancing multiple priorities had made her better at managing complex projects and leading diverse teams. Tommy and Emma had become genuine friends, with sleepovers alternating between our apartment and Sarah's house. Sarah had started dating again, and I'd even been on a few dates myself with a teacher from Emma's school who Sarah had introduced me to. You know what I realized? Sarah said one evening as we watched our kids play in her backyard. I spent so much time trying to be the perfect employee that I forgot the most important thing about being a parent. What's that? Kids don't need perfect parents, she said, smiling as Emma pushed Tommy on the swing. They just need honest ones. The woman who had knocked on my door that rainy night had been drowning in the pressure to be perfect. The woman sitting beside me now was someone who'd learned that strength doesn't come from hiding your struggles, but from facing them with people who care about you. Sarah never did become the stereotypical power executive she thought she needed to be. Instead, she became something better, a leader who understood that supporting working parents wasn't just good policy, it was good business. She started mentoring other women in the company, created employee resource groups for working parents, and even convinced management to implement on-site childcare. Remember that night when you said we'd figure it out together? Sarah asked as we watched our kids chase fireflies in her backyard. Best decision I ever made, I replied. Second best, she said, smiling at me in a way that made my heart skip a beat. What was the first? Knocking on your door instead of trying to handle everything alone. Looking back, I realized that night changed both of us in ways we never expected. Sarah learned that being vulnerable doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. And I learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do for someone isn't to fix their problems, but to remind them they don't have to face those problems alone. The rain that brought Sarah to my door that night washed away more than just her perfect facade. It washed away the walls we'd both built around ourselves, the assumption that we had to have everything figured out, the belief that asking for help was a sign of failure. In the end, Sarah and I didn't just help each other survive single parenthood. We learned that the best families aren't always the ones you're born into, but sometimes the ones you choose, built from shared struggles, mutual support, and the understanding that nobody has to weather life's storms alone.